All right, folks. Poptoberfest, NOSFERATU. That's right. We're going to talk about the 1922 German expressionist first one, and then the one from last year, 2024, which I had never seen. So it'll be my first reaction to that. And Tay had not watched the original for so long. It's got to feel new, but here we are, Tay. We're talking NOSFERATU. Good times.
Yeah, super excited for this one. I think this is extremely different for me because of the expansive difference in time between each films. But like you said, having not watched the 1922 film since a film class, which that perspective does it different than just sitting down and enjoying a film yourself. Because whenever we were watching it in class, we had to break it down and go over the filmography and watch it in sections. So it wasn't nearly as exciting as sitting down and watching it all the way through like this. So being able to enjoy a classic film that way and being able to kind of get an iconic um, film that brought all around a big difference for like occult history and the time period that it was made and the way that the director implemented so many things from that time period into this film was a huge deal at that time.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better. And Nosferatu is so I do have it available now on the Pops channel. So I'll make sure I put the link there for you to watch the English public domain version, and then you can actually watch the original with the German uh, pop ups and the original music and stuff there. So I have both versions now on the Pops channel to make it easier. I want to make sure I had it sort of like there forever and it's in public domain. They tried to copyright claim part of it, and I'm like, no, you don't get to copyright something from 1922. Does not happen that way. So it was really interesting to go back watching both. I have to admit, every time I watch it, I have more love for what they're able to accomplish. And this is the reason that we sort of like get Dracula in 1931 because the scripts and everything were kind of a mess. There was all this back and forth. And the guy that kind of finally puts his foot down and it says, we're going to make this movie, goes back and watches Nosferatu to kind of modify the story and figure out how to get Stoker's stuff in there. I like the fact that they change so many things, but they also are really not changing anything. They're kind of like playing the copyright game, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, Max Schreck as
Yeah.
Count Orlok is truly magnificent. There are tons of references and parallels that will exist in the sort of normie universal monster lore for folks. If you're not familiar too much with this film, I think you're not going to be lost or anything like that. You'll find all the parallels between, you know, Cutter and Harker. So, Thomas Hutter in this is Jonathan Harker. You're going to find that, Ellen is Nina. You're going to find that, every little thing it's all the story is pretty much there. And it is got different pieces of the lore. And I think the hardest thing for folks might just be the fact that it's I don't know, it's a silent movie. It's got weird, you have to put yourself in the perspective of that era, right? So they didn't do jump cuts and transitions. Everything is going to be a fade in and fade out. The way it's colored is going to be for black and white films of that time. I also think the way they have females played are not the same type of beauty and voluptuous nature that most modern cinema goers look for. So it's like it doesn't feel she doesn't feel sexy and beautiful and allure. She almost feels like a dude. I hate to say that, but it's kind of it didn't age as well in that regard. But the story itself is just absolutely fun. What is some of your initial thoughts on revisiting the 22 after so long?
So I took it kind of from both sides because I recalled, in this sense, I guess I'm kind of like silly, but I keep notes from all of the classes that I really enjoyed. So I actually went back and pulled out all of the notes from whenever we
Hmm,
watched it in school so that I
interesting.
could kind of see the history and all of the stuff that went behind the scenes for this film and how important it was. I think one of the biggest things, the biggest takes that I took, and as someone who was a huge fan of the Bram Stoker book and story, and I actually performed in the production of the play in high school, so I really have a lot of connection to this storyline. And it was interesting to see that this director was, like you said, he was determined to make this on screen no matter what the costs were, to the point where whenever it was found out by Stoker's wife at the time, she brought a lawsuit against him for copyright. And because of that circumstances, they ended up losing a good majority of the copies of the original film, to where we got lucky that someone managed to save it, and now we have it to this day, because most copies got destroyed because of that copyright lawsuit. So finding, like, hearing that kind of history behind it makes it that much more meaningful that we have the option to be able to still see this. Um, but on top of that, I also learned that um, and one of the things that I have mad respect of when it comes to the 2024 is how much he wanted to make sure that he brought that film into the here and now,
Mhm.
including the fact that the names were changed in the original film because of the copyright. He thought, if I change this to Ellen and I change this to Thomas, they're not going to connect it to Bram Stoker. Like, I can get away with it. And that's not how it ended up working. But because of the issues with copyright, whenever it ended up getting um, altered a little bit throughout history, whenever they went in and they changed the dialogue, because it is a silent film, so whenever they say things, you get the dialogue on the screen and it tells you whatever they're quote unquote saying in the film. They actually implemented the characters that we know. So they do refer to Orlok in those dialogues as Count Dracula, and they refer to Thomas as Jonathan, and that's a lot of stuff that they updated over time, but that's not how the original film was. So it's cool to kind of read up on the history of it as well, to kind of have a lot more respect for it. And then you also just kind of see the character of Nosferatu and in all of his glory when it comes to the makeup and the dedication and the commitment that they took to give him those elongated fingernails and the creepy, like, pointed ears and the jagged teeth and like the rat like appearance that he has, in comparison to maybe what we would see as a traditional vampire nowadays. It really kind of gives you the perspective on more of how the Eastern culture and their folklore looks at a vampire.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's one of those things that it doesn't. So in 1997, this is a quote that I wanted to read from Roger Ebert. He did this review in 1997. Very famous critic, of course. It's his list of great movies. He says, "quote Here is a story of Dracula before he was buried in cliche jokes, TV skits, cartoons, and more than 30 other films. The film is in awe of its material. It seems to really believe in vampires." That is really the best way to describe this film. It is sort of something that takes this so serious, makes him so creepy and weird and odd. All the different elements that kind of get morphed and changed along the way. And usually the creators discuss that. I actually just finished, I'll probably do a video at some point on Horror of Dracula, which was just called Dracula in the UK, but
Mm-hmm.
we didn't want to confuse the Americans because we're all dummies. They had changed it and called it Horror of Dracula. This is the first one with
Yeah.
Christopher Lee, and that's where they have this conversation, a brief line with the Van Helsing character played by Peter Cushing about, well, I thought they could change into bats and wolves. He's like, no, that's all just made up stuff. That doesn't really happen. And then like 2 seconds later, his character says, well, we don't really know much about vampires. And I'm like, see, they're kind of playing fast and loose with what they want to do in their movies. And this was a really
Mm-hmm.
raw, gritty, uber low budget, obviously for its era and time, just interesting journey into things, and really a tragedy that probably people are just not that familiar with, like how dark and sort of edgy that element of the tragedy it is. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that, do most people realize that this does
Yeah,
end
for
so
sure.
badly, and it's just, it's really really interesting that this was, again, 1922. I can't even get my head around 1922. That's, yeah.
Right. That's the craziness behind it too. And I think you also compare it to other films of that era when we go into like Hitchcock and things like that that were starting to get super popular when it came to the older films that are of this similar genre. It just gives you that much more respect for all that they were able to accomplish in such a short amount of time. Like, it was so funny before I like started it. I was trying to give myself ample amount of time to sit down and watch it all the way through because, like I said, originally I had to break it up for my film class, and I was like, I bet it's probably like an hour or so, like hour 15, and I got it almost right on the dot. It was like an hour and 24 minutes. Like, it's a super quick film. They get across the story immediately. You like want to make sure that you're paying attention because it doesn't have dialogue, but it has like narrations and summaries of what the transitions of the scenes are and what's happening. So you do all want to make sure that you're not missing any of that importance. But I feel like because of the time period that it was made and the things that they're able to capture in those small little pinpoints before they do their transitions, it makes it that much more exciting to watch.
Really, really interesting. And the actor and this performance, he's just completely gone. You wouldn't recognize him. So you Google Max Shrek and what he looks like, you're just not going to recognize him. To the point where there were people
Yeah.
saying that it was made up. Like there is no such thing as Max Shrek. It was really this other guy. And
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
of
I heard
uh,
that.
the first phase of the German regime and how that all comes to play, and then of course what happens, in part two of that, you sort of have this mythos and everything that kind of plays around that. And he just is so immersed into what he's doing. There is a film uh, by with William Defoe. It's all called Shadow of the Vampire, which is about Master
Yeah.
doing this role. Now, I have not seen that again in like I don't know, probably 25 years or something. I don't know. Whenever this one was a child, I probably saw it back then, or maybe just slightly before. So it is a really fascinating thing. It is the foundation of greatness for me because a film that can inspire an entire not and I know we're talking about just Dracula, we're talking about just vampires mostly, but really would we have had creature and monster stuff? Like if Universal hadn't gotten their act together, you know what I mean? I don't know. I feel that there aren't carryover stuff because even when you look at the Phantom of the Opera and you look at Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, they're good. I'm not trying to say they're bad. I'm just trying to say there's something that gets lost. There's something that's not as intense as the Nosferatu part.
Yeah.
And when they go back and they're making and Dracula feels like a silent movie in so many ways. And it takes people like James Whale and others that get a hold of Frankenstein, a Bride of Frankenstein, and make changes. And you see what Karloff brings to life with the Mummy franchise and stuff, but
Yeah.
it still feels almost sanitized compared to this movie. This movie
That's fair.
just it feels so much like I said, raw and gritty. And I mean that like this had to just have been terrifying for folks to be
Oh
like, wait a minute,
yeah.
hold even just the rats, even just the way they they pull the thing open, there's like actual live rats, and you're like, holy cow,
All over the place. Yeah.
had to just be shocking for folks again, I can't say it enough, folks. 1922. Get that around your head. Over
Yep.
100 years. That's crazy. So
Exactly. I think it was also a matter of like because it's a silent film, it's a different perspective. It goes back to where like people always talk about whenever you're reading, you put yourself in the story. You are sucked in to take this dialogue a different way. It's the same exact thing with a silent film. Like even though we have that soundtrack that's playing in the background while you're watching the film. The score is really good. It engulfs you into it. But it's also a matter of every single time they're talking in that moment, you're looking at their emotions, their facial expressions. They have to exaggerate everything a lot more because there's not any sound on the actual film. Their facial expressions are more exaggerated, the way that they're holding each other, the way she's like entranced, like her eyes are bigger, like all of that has to be done in a different way than what we do films now because of the fact that they didn't have all the sounds and the foley and all the stuff that we get now in films. So I feel like because of that, it makes it even more of a raw film and more of a thriller and scary. And then the way that it implements the plague in the 20s, like that's not that long. Like the
yeah.
people that are involved in this film were people that had experienced the war. Like they experienced true trauma and they're the ones that are determined to put this on the big screen. And so taking all of that into consideration makes you even more thrilled and more engulfed into it to watch it every second by second.
So I don't get to say it much. I'll score the movie, and I can't not give it a 5 because it has a perfect
Mm-hmm.
story. It deals with occult and horror in a way that I can't even imagine in 1922. It is the foundation of basically most horror. Like I don't know how you can't go from Nosferatu to the Universal monsters through Hammer horror to this sort of like creature of these mythological monsters that run through our culture and the zeitgeist for now over 100 years without having to go back to this as a foundational film. And then the metamorphosis, because everyone talks about Lon Chaney, the man of a thousand faces. We talk about what his son Lon Chaney Jr. goes through to become the werewolf. We talk Wolfman. We talk about what Boris Karloff did to his body to become Frankenstein's monster. There's so many of these things. Klaus Kinski took a stab at this, and that's a film I need to revisit, of course, to give it a little fair, middle ground too. But yeah, it's a 5 for me. So I before we get to the new film, I wanted to kind of put my pin there and my thoughts on it. For sure, it's definitely one of my great films of all time. I don't know how to put it in any other words. I wouldn't even know what to say beyond that. What say you, Tay?
I'm right there with you, but I feel it's because of the expansive respect I have for it. Overall, the fact that I've been able to evaluate it on a whole new level because of my film class. So I have all of that knowledge that gives you even more respect for the film and watching it. But then it's also a matter of just in awe of what they were able to accomplish for that time period and the foundation that they set for so many things. And you know that it's madly respected when Nosferatu is implemented in things that we do uh, nowadays. He was in one of the infamous hordes at Universal Studios for their Halloween Horror Nights because they did classic vampires, and Nosferatu
Mm,
was their forefront. Like they have respect for him as a character. They know that he is the one that kind of set the expectation for what a vampire is
hmm
from the horror universe, and then it kind of expanded from there. So I definitely feel like you said, there's not a way to really give it a lower rating because of the things that it did for its time.
Yeah, I don't get to be. I don't get to shout it's a 5 out of 5 very often. And I think
No.
that if you want to criticize it, go right ahead. Let me know what your criticisms are. I didn't even go into the weeds. She was talking about film class stuff. You can look into it from more of an analytical film class stuff. But we would be here for
Yeah,
probably a
for
2 hour
sure.
show dissecting
Yes.
scenes and elements and goth.
Yes.
What goth is, what gothic horror become, how things. It's an incredible take each topic, it's a Venn diagram, and it keeps going back to
Exactly.
Nosferatu, and you end up with this. And then when you fast forward now 100 years, and you start to say, all right, well, let's remake this movie. And I have to
Yep.
admit, I had put off seeing this. I am hesitant to see this. I was like, oh man, I don't know that I can do this. A lot of
That's
people
fair.
have praised Robert Eggers. Like I get it. Like Robert Eggers had done The Witch. It was widely touted. I'm not super into sort of like odd supernatural type stuff. I kind of had that vibe. Similar conversations are being had about Lighthouse. I'm interested in
Mhm.
watching Lighthouse. I hadn't seen that either. So I was like, okay, that's fine. And then of course, I saw pieces to go want to go see it, and she could vouch. There's no way I was getting mom to go see this. So mom wasn't going.
Yeah.
I'd be on my own.
That's
And that did not happen. So I haven't seen it. And then it dropped
fair.
on streaming. And I'm like, I don't want to watch it in like March. I'll just
No,
save it.
that's fair.
And that's what I did. I just saved it. So I saved it for this.
He's coming.
He is coming.
He is coming.
NOSFERATU, rated R, only in theaters Christmas Day. Special engagements in Dolby and IMAX.
And I will tell you what, this film was criminally avoided and abused and not acknowledged by the Oscar Academy. Now, I know the Oscars, I get it. They gave it some different nods, costuming, set design stuff that they normally do. This will be a regular theme on the channel, as many of you know. I can't stand it when these people will go out of their way to praise every element of the movie. They'll talk about cinematography and they'll talk about every little element and then whatever. And then they just don't. And if you read the reviews will be like, it's a 5-star movie. It's whatever. And then the Oscars do their thing and they don't nominate for Best Picture. They don't nominate in their
No.
performances. They don't do any of that kind of. And you're
Mm.
like, this first
Crazy.
happened for me. This first happened like the big eye opener. And I always people talk about the new era. You'll hear terms like woke and postmodernism and well, fine, but it goes back long before that, and it has to do with Batman. I know that sounds ridiculous, but the
Okay.
Batman movies were praised to the hilt. And after Batman Begins, I was like, it's fine. It's not your guys' thing. I get it. But when Dark Knight was praised as well, and they still wouldn't do that, and I'm like, okay, you're praising it for all the aspects that make a movie, except that it's a good movie. They did the
Yeah.
exact same thing to Nosferatu. And I was so frustrated in the back of my mind the whole time about how perfect this movie was for what he wanted to accomplish. He
Yeah.
tells the same story of Count Orlok. He, man, some of these imagery, I don't even know. All right, YouTube, you'll do whatever you do. You, you know,
Mhm.
if I gotta trim it, I
Uh,
gotta trim it.
Great show.
Uh, he
So
went
well
there.
done.
He went there in all of the glory of a horror film, but in
Mhm.
something that is a drama and a story and all the key things that you
Yeah.
would want. And maybe the performances don't deserve it in a way, but I'm so sick and tired of hearing how some of these performances that I'm supposed to love are great. Whenever I see people get lost in a character like Bill Skarsgård, you can't even recognize Bill Skarsgård. You actually have to see a still of Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok to see Bill Skarsgård. In the movie, you can't tell. I don't think. Taylor, can you? I can't tell.
Oh no, not at all. The way that she shadowed out so
Yeah,
much and the way that they angle up, there's
yeah,
no way. That's how they wanted it though.
yeah, yeah.
They
So
wanted him to be unrecognizable.
yeah, so in Pennywise, you can kind of see it. Like I get it.
Yeah,
Like
that's
Pennywise, you
true.
can kind of see it. I can see
With the
Bill. I can
eyes,
see
yeah.
Bill's face. I can see some structure. There's different way. I get it,
Hmm.
right? And I didn't watch Crow. Crow's that was a black film.
Oh
I'm
no,
not
I
watching
don't.
Crow. There's only one film. There's only
No,
one Crow movie. Only lasted
it's
20 minutes of
great.
one of the sequels. We're not doing it. So sorry to Bill Skarsgård. You got the Shaft. I knew you were going to get the Shaft. You should have run the script by me. I would have told you just burn the whole thing. It's just garbage. But
Yeah. Okay.
the fact that we won't honor such an immersive performance, similar in a lot of ways, that pays as much, if not more, honor to what Max Shrek did by having something that you would immerse. Like, you know what I mean? It's like I feel like the best way to honor him in that first movie is to do something on this kind of scale. So, what
Yes.
was some of your thoughts revisiting this one after revisiting the first one?
I have even more respect for it. I feel like he did everything that he needed it to do to bring light and modernize a film while sticking and enhancing the story in all the right places. And I feel I've only seen The Witch and The Northman, so I have a little bit of an idea of how he works when he does films. When you take into consideration the effort he put into not only sticking to the original story of the 1922 film and implementing similar things, sticking to the name changes, um, because of the copyright issues that they had back in the day,
Hmm.
implementing all of
Yeah.
that, it makes it that much more intense because you pick all of that out as you're watching it, but then you're also just so engulfed because his storytelling is enhancing the film. It's not taking away from it. And I feel like one of the biggest things that I love is that the enhancement that he made was based off of the time period and the area. It's based
Yeah.
off of Romanian folklore. It's based off of that time period and how intense the plague was and how fearful people were of the plague and the occult and how intense it was back then and how whenever it was growing in knowledge it was hindered on, but people knew whenever you had the unexplained you had to find somebody that could explain it to you. And I feel like Willem Dafoe's character, even though he's implemented in a different way than the original Doctor, it was absolutely perfectly done. I feel like that implementing of the occult storyline and the intense connection that Ellen has, all of that was done so well that it makes it even more impactful as far as a horror film and standpoint.
So that'll be our only bone of contention, I think. And I know I'm going to get the hate. And I've heard it all along how much I'm going to love William Dafoe in this movie.
Okay.
So before I get to William Dafoe, let me just say that Lily Rose, I know you had seen The Witch. You already were familiar with, you know,
Yes.
Little Depp. She blew me away. She was
Yeah,
phenomenal in this
she
movie.
was.
I'm actually
Mhm.
disappointed that she may be kind of like stereotyping herself because she's done The Witch, she's doing Nosferatu, and she's actually going to be in his new one called Werewolf, which is pronounced,
Okay, I didn't know that.
which is WER no second E, werewolf, I think. So
Hmm,
I don't
okay.
know totally much about that movie. I just, again, researching this and whatever. It's supposed to come out sometime next year. I feel it might be typing her a little bit. Everything Nicholas Hoult does, he's phenomenal in. I can't think of
Agreed.
all of his bad movies that he's been in. He was the problem. I loved him in Renfield. I know people hate me, or I got a lot of hate for liking Renfield. I thought
I
Renfield was
loved Renfield.
popcorn, stupid
Loved
fun
it.
with Nick
Loved
Cage
it.
as a Dracula. It's completely
Yes,
insane.
that's why it was fantastic.
The only thing I say is I think that when you do those movies to help
Yeah,
the people out there, if you were to listen to old pops, take some advice. When you make that movie, don't call him Dracula and Renfield. Just come up with other names. Just make them
that's
other
fair. That's
vampires
fair.
and just do something else that's, you know, my Dracula was my great
Similar.
great great grandfather or something. Like
Yeah,
just he birthed my line or whatever, but I'm not a Dracula. You know, it's something that lets them
yeah,
off the hook of not being. But that notwithstanding, I had a good time. Nicholas Holt's fine. Now, William Defoe. Now, I am not criticizing William Defoe and what people like. He is just Willem Dafoe. And that was my
that's
problem.
fair.
Like, he didn't
That's fair.
disappear. He didn't disappear as a Van Helsing. And I want to contrast that with the fact that Anthony Hopkins as Van Helsing in Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola, I never
Mhm.
think of him as Anthony Hopkins. He feels like a Van Helsing. So
That's
this is what I categorize as a nitpick. Not a
that's fair.
big deal. It's an issue, but it didn't take me out of the story. It doesn't ruin the story. I never sat there distracted. I didn't groan or anything like that. I just went along with it. But I think some people had talked about it so much. I just see William Defoe, and it's because he's so good in so many things.
Mhm.
He doesn't
That's fair.
disappear, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Boondon Sanks is an insane role. The dude is completely unhinged in a role like that, right? He doesn't. He's just
Yeah.
so he's maniacal as a Green Goblin and all those things that he's done over the decades. Fine. So it is a phenomenal adaptation. I think you're right about leaning into occult and things that because he was so obsessed. Again, I'm sorry, Robert Eggers was so obsessed with trying to lean into the culture, everything from gypsy culture to Icelandic
Yeah.
opera to Mongolia
Mhm.
style of singing
Yeah.
to the type of costumes to what Romanians would wear to what the Czech dancers would look like. Just
Mhm.
there
Everything.
are so many components. I feel like it was 1922 all over again. I feel like it's so raw and gritty and real. Like I'm in shock that he was able to pull that off more than I am anything else about the movie.
Yeah. That's fair. I completely agree. I feel like the fact that he was able to draw us into the film in a whole different way by putting us there with everything that he implemented, nothing was off. Like the costuming is fantastic. Even Orlok himself, the fact that he is implementing a Romanian nobleman coming back looking the way he does. Like he has the accent, he has the body language. He tells like I'm Lord, like you're going to refer to me by my title based off my bloodline. Like all of that. And like a lot of people, what blows my mind is that the few people that I've seen that have like bashed Orlok because he has a mustache. And I was like, do you not know what Romanian noblemen looked like? That's how they did. They had the tall fur hats. They wore the
Mm-hmm.
ginormous coats all the time. They were slumped over because their coats were so heavy. They had the giant mustaches. That was a symbolism for their nobility. Like that's how you knew that they were because they were able to keep the mustache styled the way that it needed to be. So I find the fact that he implemented small things like that into a monster that's so well known, um, but it still appeals to the character. It still
Mm-hmm.
appeals to Orlok. It's not taking away from it. I don't feel like him not going back to. I feel like almost like you said, similar to in order to pay respect in a different light, like not taking away from the character that we all know and love from the original, but still paying respect to the mannerisms and the
Mm-hmm.
creepiness and the way he comes out of the coffin and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
All of that traces back to the original in the best way possible. And I think he did a perfect way of doing
I mean, he duplicated some of the shadow scenes. He duplicated direct lines from the original film, did that direct
it. Yep.
moments. And I will say, with the look and the appearance, it's a progression through the movie. You really, even with the interactions early in the film, you don't really know exactly what you're seeing or not seeing. Like, it's very, and you're like, wait, what does he kind of look like? You really don't
Yep.
know, as he's dealing with Hutter and Nicholas Holt's character. And then you have the bite that's, again, very much right out of the original film. And then
Yeah.
as it goes on, you do see the mustache, and you also see this version of a monster as different segments, especially when she and he are confronting each other, making their deal over the
Yes.
3 days. You really see him for the
Yep.
first time. And
Mhm.
like you said, he's hunched over. You still don't totally know what you get. But by the end, he's such a monster, and you have a different
Mhm.
version of what you're getting your head around. Again,
Yeah.
find me Bill Skarsgård in there. Like
I
I'm
know. It's crazy.
yeah. Yeah, the shadows and stuff, it all hides it really well. You have to find movie stills in order to find Bill Skarsgård in there. You have to
Yeah.
find
In
a
the
shot.
moment, you can't, like,
No.
while you're watching it, there's
Yeah.
not a way because the way that they pan things and the angles they get him at, like, it's just
Yeah.
not there unless you're
Yeah.
really paying attention.
Yeah. Everything about it is really just spectacular. Now, from a horror standpoint, I guess if there was a criticism I had, and I don't know that call it a criticism, it may not be everybody's liking, that it
Mhm.
feels less Dracula and less vampire lore and more into the occult. So it
Yeah.
feels more like a supernatural Ouija board movie. Like, it feels more like, all right, if we really had a
Mission.
dude in Transylvania,
Mhm.
because I would say there's some Vlad the Impaler inspirations and that,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so her having a spiritual connection with him and having these convulsions and visions and whatever, that creepiness and that eeriness of all of that might be some of the most unnerving elements for someone expecting more of a vampire film or something. But I think this is what sets it apart from other stuff. Like, he's made a statement for himself to say, listen, I don't want to make a Dracula movie. I don't want to make another vampire movie. I want to remake this Nosferatu, this foundational film that was so inspirational back in the day. But I want to do
Yeah.
it with all of our knowledge that we have about the culture and whatever, to make it feel like it could have actually have happened. And the fact
Yes.
that they, I think, kind of compartmentalized the film as well. Like, you feel like it could happen with the way, as because in Orlok, with the way that Nosferatu ends, when he ends, the plague ends. So you feel
Yep.
like it's sort of got a bookend of a start and a finish. This is what happened with the guy. This is what happened when he dies. Bam, done.
Yep.
I like that a lot, because then the myth and stuff can grow out of that if this were to have really happened, right? So I
True.
think that's where Robert Eggers really hits the home run. He creates something that feels very believable. I'm kind of
Mhm.
stretching through the best I can with that, but
I
I
get
think
what you're
you think,
saying. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah,
He puts you in that time period in a different way.
yeah.
And I will say, for coming from the side of it, like you said, for like the vampire side of it, I think when I was kind of trying to dive into it a little bit more, like I did with the original, as far as the back end and the inspiration that he had with a lot of stuff, his respect to the folklore of vampires from the Romanian side is a
Hmm.
lot different than our folklore vampires, going
Right,
down to the rituals that they do.
right.
Like, that's an actual ritual that they perform. The implementation of the gypsies and how insane they are, and their belief system, and how far they'll go to follow through with things. Even down to like the way that he bites. Our vampires are always like, oh, they would go to the neck because of the arteries and all that stuff. The original story was like, from their belief on the vampires, is that they would go for the chest because they're trying to get to your heart.
Yep.
They're trying to dive into your body, and that's where they believe the most source of nutrition is. And so I feel like that, um, in itself, the respect that he puts on their beliefs and their occult side of things, instead of it just being, well, we're going to take a westernized belief system and stage it over in Germany, it's not doing it that way. And that's why I feel like you said it engulfs you even more in that time period and makes it to where, like, if this was something that was real, and the supernatural and the way that it's handled with the occult, like, it creeps you out even more because it makes it so realistic for the time period that it was made.
Yeah, I couldn't. I was trying to think if I could liken it. I guess I have to liken it to Exorcist, which I refuse to watch again because I feel like it's rooted in
Sure.
something that's so believable that even like the church was like, yeah, it's kind of what an exorcism is like. That
Yeah.
I feel like that's what he achieves. He achieves something that is so his historically acceptable to have been possible that
Yep.
it makes sense for whatever that means.
Yep.
Maybe you don't believe he's an undead dude to live for 600 years, but you could believe that this is a guy that was creating mass murder. For some reason, it
Yep.
also happened at the time of a rat plague. And therefore,
Yep.
when he dies, the plague stops or whatever. Maybe that's a coincidence or not. But you feel like the folklore and all of that could have been birthed into the vampirism that we know and that we still see in cinema today. So, truly spectacular film. And I said, like I said at the early part of the show, I'm so angry that this film is given accolade after accolade in every possible way. Here's Aaron Taylor Johnson. He's phenomenal. Again, cast, crew, details,
Amazing.
technical. This is their. So in Nosferatu, folks, he's it's not Renfield. I mean, I made a Renfield reference earlier,
Knock.
but it's yeah,
Yep.
it's not. So just make sure you guys understand that these are. It's just it's done for a gruesome effect. It's done perfectly well. Everything that you want there. Wow, I have some jets flying over. Hang on, folks. I assume Taylor can hear that even, right?
A little bit. It wasn't too
Yeah,
bad.
yeah, that's crazy. It's really loud. Uh, it bothers. Wow, sorry, I'm distracted by the fact that there's like airplanes flying like really
You can
low.
hear them. I definitely can't. So
Okay, I like I said, I'm bothered by the fact that if you read anybody's reviews, they're giving this movie like 4 out of 4 stars, and they're trying to say it's this great movie and all these different accolades. But then, hey, by the way, when it comes time to give it the
nothing.
most prestigious awards, we just throw
Yeah.
some general nominations its way. We don't really give it anything. Doesn't win an Oscar for costume, cinematography, whatever. And I'm like, the movies that get put out there were just such garbage. I got to be honest. From Honora to Amelia Perez. And I know, look, I did a review on Conclave. I have my own personal issues why I think it's a garbage movie. And, I guess you could say at least it's close with some of those technical achievements, but I don't think it got any. It didn't get adapted screenplay. It didn't get a nomination for that. It didn't get. So it's just really
Didn't get
tragic.
anything.
It
Yeah.
got nominations. So it got nominations for production
Like costuming
design.
and stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it
Nothing
loses.
that
It
it should have
loses.
been nominated.
Right. It loses to Wicked. Right. It makeup and
Yeah, that's true.
makeup and stuff. It loses to substance, which I've heard good things about. Right. That's fine.
Yep.
Cinematography, but it loses to The Brutalist, which I have no desire to watch that film. So
Uh,
maybe maybe I'm overreacting, but I feel that this is the typical thing that in 10 more years, people will still be watching Nosferatu. And every year, this time of the year, and by the way, this is something that I haven't talked about with Taylor. So make sure her take on it. By the way, this is why movies like Die Hard and Gremlins and most horror movies that failed, like The Thing, like Blade
yeah.
Runner, Tremors, they didn't become box office phenomenons or whatever because they weren't released during those times. They were released during the summer because when you made your money was during the summer. That they didn't believe that you would release things in October to get 3 or 4 weeks. They didn't think you would release things in December for Christmas for 3 or 4 weeks. They wanted it during the summer so they could try to get 2 or 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Reality is the legacy of this movie will live on because of the Halloween spooky season, right? This will be the movie. Nosferatu has lived on for over 100 years. We're still referencing it, even if we don't realize that we're referencing it. And now it's been brought so much attention with this film that all those other movies I mentioned, no one's watching any of those. Wicked may be the only one that some people love because, excuse me, that's their
Okay.
thing, that's their IP. But I
Mm-hmm.
argue that I was bored out of my mind. I that movie,
I don't like
I don't understand why they duped them into making 3-hour movies out of this thing. Like, why on earth did you guys not just make 2-hour movies? Like, what are you doing? No. So I think
it.
that's where it will be a problem. A 2-hour cut of these movies would be fine. But same thing happened with The Hobbit. Studio got involved. We need more,
True.
and they messed up The Hobbit by making
Yeah.
it into 3 movies instead of 2. So, yeah, I'll let you score this one first. How do you want to score the new one?
Um. So I feel like I'm gonna be a 4. I feel like there are elements that I feel like could have made it even better. Um. Only because even though they like overall the film like immersed me, there are times where I feel like there were things that may have been a little bit exaggerated or may not have needed to be focused on as much. Um. And personal preference, I found like a little bit odd on the connection that Ellen has with Nosferatu from a paranormal and occult side. I was like, okay, that makes sense for the original story and the things that we got in Ellen's reactions and the way that she's handling herself when she's being like summoned by him in the original film. So getting that and a lot more elaborated on was interesting to me, and it made it to where having the doctor come in and explaining all of that added more to the story of Orlok. But as far as like the more like sexualized like things that were implemented, it wasn't necessarily that I didn't see that that made sense, because vampires are often seen as hypnotizing
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
or sensual creatures. So that is something that is normal for the story. But whenever I read up on all of the stuff that's on that side of the folklore for Romania and Germany, that's not something that's implemented. Their vampires are just terrifying.
Mhm.
So I feel like he was kind of sneaking that in to the folklore to kind of appeal to the people that want that side of the vampires. And I didn't kind of like, in a lot of ways, it felt forced when it was put in.
Mm.
But it wasn't necessarily bad for me. I just didn't feel like it was like to go to the lengths that he went to. I didn't feel was necessary. But I feel like overall, like the story itself is so well done, and he is spot on with incorporating the original story, um, invoking like crazy feelings of like, what if this could be
Mhm.
a real thing? Like, is this where it derived from? Like, how is the impact the plague had on these people? All of that was just so crazy to me, and I feel like the respect that he gave to the original film, it just adds even more to it. So I feel like watching it back to back like we did makes it that much more of an enjoyable experience. But I also feel like just even when I first saw it, I loved the film. It's just so beautiful and so well done.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm actually kind of surprised that we're coming down in a very similar perspective. Maybe not exactly from the same angle, but similar. For instance, I didn't like when he is feeding on Jonathan. Sorry,
Mhm.
no, Thomas, right? Thomas.
Thomas, yes, it's
Yeah,
fair.
sorry,
It's the
Thomas.
original story. It throws you off.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
when he's feeding on Thomas, they obviously are going for that innuendo, and I wish they had just shown him feeding and then like put him to sleep or something. Like just we didn't need it to be
which is
drawn
what
out
I
the way
kind
they
of
did
get
it.
at the very end of it. Yeah, at the
Yeah,
very end of it, you get that when he's just in
right.
front of the fireplace. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So there's that like that, and I think the whole thing about he Orlok is getting him to sign away an annulment of his marriage is something that's
Yeah.
discussed, but it wasn't really
Mhm.
clear when it was happening. It was very confusing when it was happening. Is that what
No,
was
you
happening?
wouldn't know if you didn't research it. Yeah, if
Mm-mm.
you
If
did
you're
not
not
research
following
it,
along with those
or
details, or if you don't watch it a
yeah.
second time, you'll pick up a. So I think there's little things that the movie does that it kind of wants a pass for doing right, because the occult stuff and stuff isn't really clear either on why. Because there's so much talk about stuff of visions she had when she was young, and she always knew when her Christmas
Mhm.
presents were. And all right, well, it
Yeah,
kind of
it's
makes sense,
weird.
but not really makes sense. So it wasn't really spelled out. Like even other Dracula movies, like it's a big deal of like he sees the woman, it looks like his old beloved. That wasn't spelled out if that's what they're kind of going
No,
for. And I think that
no.
you could easily have tweaked that to make it a little smooth, but there's so many. It's so over the top with like that again, the conjuring, insidious, over the top supernatural
True.
stuff.
Possession aspect of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's almost like a distractor because it's on like 9, and I don't hate it. I'm still super into it, but I think that's what deflates it from perfection. Is
Hmm.
it's filled with a lot of that of sort of like catering. And again, the movie's long; it's like over 2 hours long. So
Yeah.
those are my 10 or 15 minutes I went back. Don't go over 2 hours. So my 10 or 15 minutes I went back is just a reduction of those things, not cut completely. Like
No, no,
there's
no.
so much of it that we could just reduce some of it. I also think the bickering scenes. So, and I will say he does try to get a little gratuitous with the death of uh, uh, Frederick. Right, Frederick's wife
Oh,
dies,
yeah,
and they
yeah.
get
That's
gratuitous when
fair.
they find Lucy, and then he's like on top of her. It's like, okay, we're just being gratuitous. We're just getting carried away. So we can just trim away some of that. I consider that just fat. But the
That's
problem
fair.
is, it's still
Drawn out.
only
Yeah,
it's only like 2 hours and a little bit. It's not like it's 3 hours long. So it's like I mentioned Wicked
that's
earlier.
true.
Wicked took advantage of me. I ain't said to that
Uh,
nonsense again. This I will watch again. And this, you know what I mean? So I'm actually willing to go a little higher than Taylor, which is now I'm willing to go to a
That's
4.5. I'm willing to
crazy.
say it's a 9 out of
Okay.
10. And I feel like this movie was robbed compared to other good movies of 2024. Like this is the
Yes.
Godzilla minus one treatment because that movie got completely ignored by critics. I think it got like the
Yeah. It
international.
was so good.
It's insane how you make literally the
Yeah.
best Godzilla movie probably of all time, at least compared to the original, and you praise it on every single thing. But it would be beneath them to acknowledge that it's a best picture because it's just a stupid monster movie. And I feel like that is exactly where these critics and the Oscar people come from.
It's a
And
monster
sadly,
film. Mhm.
Nosferatu will just make them look bad. I got to be honest because we're still talking about 1922. It's out there. You can watch it here on the Pops channel. And then now we have a reason to kind of get a modern version that kind of makes you think, like Taylor was saying so eloquently about, like, wow, this could actually happen. Look at how well it intertwines with all of these different, uh, myths and traditions. And I mean, the costuming, the detail. If you read about just the costuming, what Linda Muir did was just crazy. Like the amount of detail that was spent to try to research what they would. It's phenomenal. I don't know what to
Mhm.
do. I didn't think it would ever get better
Than the
than
original.
than Francis Ford Coppola's in that regard. You know what I mean? So I always think that Bram Stoker's by Francis Ford Coppola is the closest you get to
Gets her. That's fair.
immersion, the
Mhm.
culture, the feel. It's weird. It's got all that stuff. I mean, again, that movie is hindered by. We're going to talk about. I'll talk hard on that in Tuesday, in October. And if you missed it, the link will be in the description. But Keanu Reeves is in it. Biggest mistake they made in that movie was hiring Keanu Reeves. Like, I don't know what you're doing, but I didn't think
Mhm.
they could top that with that sort of like bringing those elements together. This one is way superior than that. Way superior than that for sure. 100%. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts?
I think kind of what you said kind of makes me think on it a little bit more. I still think that I'll stick with the 4 just because you get lost in you want to have respect for the background and the implementation of the supernatural and the occult that they to explain what's actually happening, which
Mm-hmm.
adds more storytelling to Orlok and Ellen, which I really do enjoy. I'm glad that there was more perspective on that. But maybe that's like what you said, they couldn't pick what they wanted to do, and that's why it
Mm-hmm.
throws me off. Like you can't it's like, do I want to do traditional vampire? Do I want to do a cult? Do I want to do supernatural possession? And they're like, I can't pick. Let's just throw a little bit of everything in there. And
Yeah.
I'm like, so what's happening to her? Like, you got to give me a
Yeah.
little bit more to go off of. Pick one and do a really elaborate take on it, and maybe I would have been a little bit more. But I feel like that might be what it is. It's more so of like they couldn't give an idea or like a finalized grasp of this is what's actually happening to Ellen, and this is why they can't do anything because it's something beyond what our understanding is. And I feel
Yeah.
like they didn't like pick one, and that's why it throws me off in a lot of ways. I really enjoyed it though. That's why it's like you said, it's a nitpick. Like it's really not anything that
Yeah.
takes
Yeah.
away from the film, but it is something like if you really wanted to go all the way, if you had picked one of those and you focused on it and that would have been the forefront, like easily it would have
I think they
completed it.
easily could have just had her be a love from his past. Like he sees the
Yeah,
locket, and instead of being, I'm going to cheat them out of their marriage and I'm going to hold this locket and whatever, it could have just been traditional Dracula stuff. He sees the locket and he's like, has
died.
this obsession with this woman of his past.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
fine. And that's why she's having this reaction. It's like she is connected now to him or whatever
Entranced.
because of that.
Hmm.
But again, it may play better when I watch it again. I may feel better when William Defoe's trying to explain things to me because I feel like
Maybe,
he was
maybe.
trying to teach me the algebra equation about it all, and I couldn't quite get it, and it didn't quite work. But
The
at the end,
algebra.
yeah, it's like an algebra.
Yeah.
It's a cult
You added
squared
letters in there.
plus
Yep.
yeah a cult squared plus 2/3 supernatural. Yeah, it's how I feel.
Yep.
So it
Yep.
again, but I feel nitpick is the right thing, and it's so superior at most things. I
Yeah.
and there are things that I give a 4 to that I feel like this is superior to. So that's why I'm going to lean that for now at a 4.5. And it really becomes one of those things. Like I think if you go to the absurd, like every time you go to a from a 5-point scale to a 10-point scale, you get halves. If you go to a 10-point scale to a 20-point
That's
scale
fair.
or whatever,
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, all right. So then it would be like 8.75. It would be like a 17, or you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like
right. Yeah.
so. Yeah, it's fine. But no, it's really interesting to I think what you said at the very beginning, where we want to end at, is that you feel like you are now experiencing like all of Hollywood's history now. Watching these two movies back to back, you are now experiencing
So
an
amazing.
extreme perspective through horror of all
Mhm.
things of Hollywood in 1922 to Hollywood today, and your brain just kind of breaks a little bit on everything in between. It's fascinating experience to watch them back to back. By the way, if you haven't done that, folks, I think you should. So
I agree.
yeah.
I definitely agree.
Well, folks, check out the playlist. Check out the link for her. She'll be doing some of her own content. Popstoberfest is got a link there in case you missed some videos and stuff like that. Join me on Tuesday nights live for Talk Hard, and it's been great doing this. It's a fun time. Taylor and I are enjoying our weekly hangouts, hanging out, talking movies and nerdy stuff. So make sure you check back with us for that too. So, folks, be blessed. Talk hard. Until next time, I'm Pops.